Good afternoon, everyone. I think now it's widely acknowledged, and you have heard this in the morning, that the CFO function has evolved a lot over the last 15, 20 years. In fact, I think on the C-suite is the function that's evolved the most. And in a sense, I'm empathetic to all of you with the challenges ahead, because what people are asking of you is that besides doing your day job of compliance and filing reports and performance management, you're now expected to be a trusted advisor to the CEO, to the board, and the business unit management. So the question on the table is, how does one do that? And what I wanted to share with you today is what we at BCG have observed from working with our clients globally. What are some of the best practices that we have seen, so that you can all walk away with at least one or two nuggets of wisdom here that might help you face the challenges. But as I said, I'm pretty empathetic to the challenges that all of you face in terms of building the finance function of the future. I have a question for you. Which of these four banks, and I don't know if you're familiar with all four, but these are the four leading banks in Australia, and my apologies that I'm borrowing an example from Australia. Which of these five companies do you think has or is acknowledged as the leader in the finance function? And you can talk to your colleagues on your table, your peers, and I'll give you 30 seconds to think about what you've heard. Maybe it's guesswork on your part. Okay, so how many of you picked CBA? Oh, about a third of you. Well, good. You're in the right boat here. That's the right answer. As far as we can tell, they by far have a finance function that, in my opinion, is way ahead of their peers. And what I would like to share with you is an interview with David Craig, their CFO, who was named the CFO of the year last year by the AFR, the leading Australian business newspaper, AFR. And as you listen to this interview, what I would love for you to do is just take down 2 or 3 notes about what he and his team are doing to build the finance function of the future. David Craig has been at the helm for, I think, 8 to 10 years now. The company today is worth $150 billion market cap, is one of the biggest 10 banks in the world from market cap, but it was not that size 10 years ago, and he and the management team have grown it into a phenomenal success. So here, let's take a look at what he has to say, and if you can help me out.
Period for CFOs. I say that because we've gone from a period of great boom, where virtually any business was making good money, to one now where things are much tighter. And so companies are looking to their CFOs to provide much greater insight, much more refined reporting. In particular, from our point of view, and I think really for most organisations, they're trying to move more to, as I said, insights, with accountants spending more time at the right hand at board with executives advising them, and less time just crunching numbers. So from our point of view, for example, I have a mantra that we should spend no more than 5 days of the month looking at historical numbers, and the other 25 days a month should be looking at the future. How can we do better in the future? And I think that's...
Have you achieved that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, we're now down to 4 days a month on historical reporting, so 26 days on the future.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge in getting your team shifted to that kind of...
Look, it's a mindset. You set bold challenges and you explain what you're trying to do, and then you give them obviously training and development towards that. And you build up that trusted advisor status, not just for me, obviously, but for all of my CFOs. So they each face off. Every single leader in the business has a CFO as their right-hand person, and they're well respected.
Yep. Do you think the responsibilities, what's going to be required, the pressures on the role are going to change again in future? And what do you think, if so?
Look, I think it's an evolution. I mean, clearly, one of the things we talk about a lot is productivity, and finance has got to be as productive as any other part of the organisation. So that means that we've got to shed work that's of less value. We've got to automate, obviously, as much as we possibly can, so that we're spending our time, on the really value-added things. And so I think that will continue to evolve over time.
Yeah, productivity you mentioned there, that's been a mantra across all sorts of industries now,
yes,
including government. What does that mean to you in practical terms, what you have to actually do, and how much more is there to do in that front for you?
Well, it's a never-ending journey, but let me start by telling you what it doesn't mean from my point of view. So productivity isn't about cost-cutting targets, it isn't about headcount reduction, particularly it isn't about offshoring. So we've made the decision that, from our point of view, our success, we think, is around having a highly engaged and motivated workforce. And to do that, you can't then sort of say, well, you're motivated and engaged, but we're going to take out 1 in 10, or we're going to offshore your jobs. So productivity is about efficiency. So what we're saying to our people is we need to take the processes that we have and find more efficient ways of doing it. If we can succeed in doing that, then that'll be a win-win, because on the one hand we'll have faster, simpler, more reliable processes. That means a better experience for our customers, but also obviously a lower cost.
Thank you. All right. I hope you found that insightful. So what are the 2 or 3 things that David talks about that's important as he builds the finance function of the future? Anyone want to blurt out or shout out what you took away from that? Forward-looking, that's right. He talks about how it's his goal that's 5 days historical and the rest, in fact, he's brought it down to 4 days. So he and his team spend the rest of the time forward-looking. And if you recollect John Goodwin's presentation for this morning, that was exactly that one of the challenges we face is that as CFOs, our job is more actually to help the management forward-looking. Okay? Anything else? Productivity, yes. He talks about productivity and efficiency. That's the mantra, or that's one of the key responsibilities of the CFO, and that's what the CFO organization is being relied on more and more to make sure that the organization becomes more and more productive over time. Automation, in terms of data automation, providing information in a very timely basis to automate things where possible. And again, I think that's more in the spirit of improving productivity and efficiency. Engagement with employees, that's right. Who would have thought 15, 20 years ago that the CFO would take on the responsibility, or at least be partially responsible for the engagement of the employees? It's the information they provide and how they communicate that leads to more or less engagement. And I think we've again heard some of that earlier today. Anything else? So let me let me boil it down to what we have seen across the globe as what the CFOs are busy doing, the pioneering CFOs are busy doing. And I will spend 2 or 3 minutes on each of these. The first one is to provide dynamic or real-time, insightful information. But it's very important that this information be easy to use and you not have reams of paper. And you'll see an example from Procter & Gamble that they have really made significant advances on this. The second is the job of the CFO, in my opinion, to bring a significant outside-in perspective. It's very easy for organizations to become insular, to focus inwardly on what they're doing, and it's incumbent on the CFO to bring in the outside perspective. And by the outside perspective, I mean both from what your competition is doing, but also what the capital markets are requiring. Very few business unit managers have access to capital markets as you as the CFOs do. They do not understand how capital markets work. They do not understand necessarily what investors are looking for. And you are the bridge between the business unit management and the investor population at large. The third is a no-brainer. I think the CFO is being viewed more and more as a chief performance officer, and that has been true for a while, not much change there. But the fourth function, I think, is very important, that the finance function is being more and more thought of as partner in strategy, in developing strategy, in identifying where the value is to be created. And in this respect, I couldn't agree more with what John Goodwin had to say this morning, that understanding the true value drivers of the business are extremely important. And one of the more popular quotes that I've heard, or at least one that I like, is from Gordon Naylor, who runs CSL, or who's the CFO for CSL, a very large pharmaceutical company. And he said, actually, accounting comes in the way of understanding the economics of business. And in times that is true, that you focus so much on the cost side or on the numbers that you forget that what you really have to understand is what drives the value in this business. And you have to look at it more from an economic point of view than from an accounting point of view. And then I'll spend a minute or two on what CSL and what Gordon Naylor has been doing to build these new capabilities. As I said earlier, I'm empathetic to what the challenges ahead lie, and how do you build these new capabilities while you're still doing your day job, while you're still applying your accounting principles to form compliance, to file reports with the authorities and so on, and then over and above that to provide trusted advice to the CEO, the board, and the business unit management. Let's just take 2 minutes on each of these. The CFO function in terms of providing real-time, insightful information. You find that one benefit you can provide to the organization as a whole is to be the keeper of the data, to be the trusted data, and it's a company-wide asset base, regardless of which country it is in. So you are able to bring in one place all the products, all the geographies together, so you can have a cut across either a geographic cut or a product cut. Doesn't matter how the management wants to look at it, but there's one source to truth. And that helps a lot for the organization to be on the same page. Working with the business units is extremely important. It has to be a harmonious process. I think there have been times when the relationship between the CFO function and the business unit management has been adversarial, and that's not very functional. It is important to figure out a way how to work with the business unit management and how to provide them with information that's useful to them, but without giving up your independence and the compliance responsibility that you bring to the table. The third one is one that everybody talks about, is big data. How do you do analytics on a large scale to generate insights for the organization? There is a debate that goes on often on whether the big data responsibility lies with marketing or with finance or with IT. I can tell you, from at least my opinion, personal opinion, it does not belong with IT at all. It's more about running a business, and to me, the logical home for big data analytics is within the CFO organization. I think they're good at it, and if they can link it to the business side of the house, it can be incredibly valuable. And the last point is to provide all of this in real time. The one role model that we have, and I'm sure there are others all over the world, but Procter & Gamble many years ago, as much as 8 years ago, developed what they call the business sphere. And it's basically, it delivers visuals, easy to navigate real-time information in rooms like what you're seeing here, where you can pull up data on how much toothpaste have you sold in France relative to India, relative to Brazil in a particular month. Is it seasonal? Is it an annual performance? Are you playing around with prices? It allows you to do a lot of simulations. But basically, you are allowing managers to, one, share data that is common and trusted and correct, and two, to do simulations and decision-making in real time. And there's a lot of information on this on the internet if you're interested in digging further into it. It's really worth it what they've been able to do this, and they didn't do it overnight. It's taken them a while to get there, but I do think it gives them a competitive edge now as they operate globally. The second one I mentioned is to bring the outside-in perspective. I think I would venture to say that virtually all of you do a reasonably good job of bringing in news on competition and how our company compares to that of our competitors, how our cost structure compares. But I think the one area that I find sometimes lacking is to bring in the capital markets perspective, is to bring in what the investors are expecting, and to be able to link the key value drivers and return on investment and earnings per share to the share price, and helping management understand what the linkages are. And one way that happens at CBA, and David Craig has done a very good job on this front, is that the key measure they have is profit after a capital charge. The mantra there is that the capital is not free, it is scarce and has a cost to it. And how much money do you make after you've been charged for the capital you use? And then each of the management understands, as a result of that, what's their contribution to the share price and how will that affect the share price. So basically, as you can see from the bottom up, the innovation here is to come up with a measure, and some people use economic profit, which is the same thing as profit after capital charge. But basically, you're linking the outside world and you're helping the business unit managers understand what is their contribution to the share price of the company, and are they increasing it over time or not? Is their plan able to increase it over time or not? I think being able to answer that question and having them perspective has multiple benefits. One is that you are all pulling in the same direction from a shareholder perspective. But equally important, you're grooming your business unit managers to become the next CEO, if that's in the cards, so that they understand how to deal with investors and how to deal with the outside world. CFOs as a chief performance officer is one that I won't dwell on. I think that's a function that the CFOs have been responsible for. So on the left-hand side of the page here, you're looking at designing the program, figuring out what are the key metrics, and then implementing an ongoing process for measuring that and putting a budgeting system. The only thing that I will add here that I've not seen that's very common is having good performance reviews or having good business performance reviews. There are a lot of companies that provide good data to their CEO and to their business unit managers every quarter, every 6 months on how you've done. But I think it's extremely important to follow that up with a business performance review. And one of my exemplars is actually from Coca-Cola. A while back when I did some work with them, they would have business performance reviews between the business unit manager and the CEO once every quarter, and the smaller countries would have it once every 6 months. The caveat or the key here was that the business unit manager could only bring one other person to the table. So this was a conversation between the CEO and the business unit manager as to how the business had done in the last 3 months and what the business unit manager was doing to improve it in case things were not going well. If they were going well, what were they doing to capitalize on their strengths? But the key was that they had to know the business inside out because they were only allowed to bring one other person into the meeting. So it was really a four-way meeting between the CEO, the CFO, the business unit manager, and one of their right-hand people. And to me, that raises the stakes a lot, but it also makes sure that your business unit managers know the economics of the business and know the ins and outs of the business and are not let off the hook, so to speak. The fourth one has to do with strategy and the role of the CFO with the strategy. And this has really been one area that has evolved a lot over the last 10 years. What you see on the left-hand side is a typical approach. You have the business unit managers formulating their business plans, and with the help of the CEO, then that gets forwarded to the finance function. The finance function lays on top of that a financial strategy as to how much money is to be raised, or if money is left over, how much of that is paid out in dividends, is there a share repurchase, the whole capital management program, and then selling that to investors. The integrated approach is what we're advocating these days, and what you find more and more, where the CFO has a seat at the table for strategy decision making, and it's really an iterative process of matching your business strategy to your financial strategy to your investor strategy, and the three being combined together. And I think that's one area where the clout of the CFO organization has gone up enormously. The role model for us there is the Pepsi Cola company. Indra Nooyi is now the CEO of Pepsi Cola, has been the CEO for a few years. She was the CFO before then, and it's perhaps because of that there are a number of things that they are really pioneered. One was very easy access to data necessary like Procter & Gamble, but this one spans not only the Pepsi Cola company, but all their bottlers, many of whom are independent companies. But nevertheless, they have convinced the bottlers to share the data so that they can all row in the same direction at the same time. They do have very tight annual planning budgeting processes. The CFO function has a seat at all strategic decisions, whether it be at the business unit level or at the group level. And they haven't forgotten their day job. They do have obviously strong fundamentals in tax and general accounting. And they would be the first to, if Indra Nui was here, she would be the first to acknowledge that there's still a lot of room for improvement. But nevertheless, I think they got it right in the sense that they have given an appropriate seat for strategy decisions to the CFO. So how do you bring all this together? And I thought I would borrow from some of the practices of Gordon Naylor, who's the CFO at CSL. CSL today is a $40 billion company, and it started as a spin-off from the Australian government in 1993 with a $100 million cap. So today they're $40 billion. I think they're the third or the fourth largest, no, it'll be the sixth or seventh largest market cap on the Australian Stock Exchange. Some of the things that Gordon has done is, one, he strongly believes that the business unit management should know more about finance, and finance should know more about business. And there is a job rotation program that goes back and forth. And I think it has brought a lot of operating experience within the finance function, and that's proven to be very beneficial both to the business units and the finance function. There's a big emphasis on differentiation and how do you differentiate yourself and how do you innovate. And so there's constant sharing about how our competitors or how CSL's competitors are innovating, and that is seen as a responsibility of the finance function to bring the outside information into the company. And then finally, Gordon is a very big believer in the development of his people, and a number of them take advantage of external development programs, such as going to the AGSM or to one of the universities for further development. And he's a strong believer in developing capabilities, that there has come a time that everybody has to have new capabilities, and he puts a lot of focus on that. So that's been a whirlwind tour of what's going on in the finance function across the globe, so to speak. And if I can just highlight the 5 big things. One is a lot of emphasis on real data processing with very good visual displays. I think in the past we have focused a little too much on the data itself and less on how it gets used and how easy it is to use. Significant outside-in perspective, especially the capital markets perspective. The third is that CFO is the Chief Performance Officer. And what we would advocate here is more focus on what does the business performance meeting look like after the quarter is over or after 6 months are over. What would you like to learn from me as a business unit manager? And what kind of conversation would you like to have with me? And then finally, I think the one area that a lot of strides have to be made is the finance function playing a big role in the company's strategy and not being thought of as an afterthought that you're going to raise the money after the strategy has been developed, but it has been in conjunction with the strategy that's been developed. And then all this requires building new capabilities, and that's how I would be the first to agree that that's easier said than done, but has to be done, and that new capabilities have to be developed over time. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Jeannie, are we going to follow the same technique as you did earlier, or would you have a new trick in the bag here?
We might follow just the standard old throw it open to the floor and see what they've got for us. If anyone has a burning question up the back there. Well, while you have a think about it, perhaps I can ask you, we do have one. Can we get a microphone over there?
Hi, Matt Crode from Becker. You made a comment before about finance owning big data and the analytics. I was just interested if you had any war stories in terms of, or I guess trying to expand on that point in terms of why finance is better enabled to own it than, say, IT and other areas.
Well, better than IT is the easier part for me, which is, I think when I've talked to people that have in the IT function that talk about big data, They approach it more from a technology point of view. The focus is more on what the technology is and what the technology can and cannot do for you, and is it real time and so on. And I think the focus should be a lot more on what the business problem you're trying to solve. So let's say if you're an insurance company and you can use big data to anticipate when a customer of yours is likely to renew or is likely to come up for a bigger insurance policy. Those are kind of business issues, is that you want to try to anticipate when you can upsell the customer, when can you anticipate that they're going to renew and they're not going to go to your competitors. And I think the finance function is in a much better position to think about the analytics required about linking the business world to some of these analytics that you have and the data that you have than the IT function is. I think there are some people who would argue that perhaps it should reside in the marketing function. The issue for me there is that the marketing function is very much, not very much, is occasionally focused on selling and marketing and not on the business problem as a whole, and ask the question, what are the trade-offs? In all of this, look, it's easy if you just had a decision to make that was obvious, but most business decisions require trade-offs. And I think that's where the finance function is better equipped to help relative to the other functions.
Other questions from the floor? Should the CFO perhaps be renamed as the CPO, the Chief Performance Officer you were telling us about?
No, I don't think so. I think the Chief Performance Officer is one of the multiple responsibilities that they have on the table. I thought you were going to ask me whether they should be named the Deputy CEO. I think there is... when
Getting back to that debate a little later.
I think there is more and more organizations where the CEO is playing some form of a role of the Deputy CEO, where it's not a substitute for the CEO, but there is enough of a vision of the company and where it is going. As I said earlier, I'm empathetic to CFOs because CFOs have to walk this tight line between being a naysayer. You don't want to be a naysayer all the time and reject all the ideas that come out, but at the same time, you don't want to say yes necessarily to every idea the business units have, because a lot of them are pie in the sky. And so you have this fine line to walk between where you're encouraging innovation, but at the same time you want a decent return on your investment. And the way that I characterize it as often is that you need to have a good commercial acumen. You need to have a good gut instinct of where money is made and how it is made. And those CFOs who have that, I think, perform far better in their jobs than others.
Any burning questions? This is your last opportunity. Yes. It's on its way.
Thank you. You mentioned the business performance review. In your view, what does that actually look like?
The business performance review to me it's really a sitting down a meeting. First of all, it has to be an in-person meeting, or it could be over a video these days, but it has to be a meeting between the CEO and the business unit management. I'm assuming that we're talking about the management or the performance at the business unit level, that the CEO has to have a conversation with the business unit management and business unit manager or MD as to what has worked well in the last quarter, what hasn't worked well. Are we on track with respect to budget? If we are on track with respect to budget, are there things that have worked well that we can do more to beat the budget? If we're not on budget, which is I think where the conversation sometimes gets more interesting, is what are you, the business unit manager, doing to improve that, and what can I as the CEO do to help you out? So I'm not here as a cop to beat you up. I'm here more as having resources, and is that what we need to help you get back on track? So it's really a conversation about how the business is going, and if it is on track, that's terrific, and how can we keep it going? And if it's not on track, what can we at the group level do to help you out? But I think the tone has to be much more of supportive. You're not there to bash people up. That's not what you're trying to do.
Got one more just down the front.
So just following on from that question, do you think it's more effective just having that one-to-one with the CEO, or as part of the management team, the executive team?
I think it has to have so the question was whether it is one-to-one or more of the management team. I'm in the camp of the tone that it has to be one-to-one, but I would suggest that the CFO has to be there, because the group CFO, and then it's up to the business unit general manager or MD to bring one other person. But it has to be a conversation where you hold the business unit the business unit MD or general manager accountable for the business, and you have to ensure that they understand the economics of the business, that they understand who the competitors are and what they're up to, that they're not always relying on their business intelligence unit to tell them how that's happening, and they're not relying on their CFO to tell them what the numbers mean. I think if you really want the business unit management, the business unit MDs and general managers to own their business, you're much better off having these one-to-one type conversations.
Any last questions? All right, please put your hands together for Ramesh
thank you.
Karnani.